The truth that no one dares to tell you, and that your ego refuses to accept, is this: being hated by everyone is the only way to be truly free. You spent your whole life believing the comforting lie that harmony is a sign of strength, and that having allies is the only path to victory. You were taught to beg for approval, to smooth your edges to fit someone else's mold, and to fear the silence of a room that turns against you. But look at yourself now. Feel the weight of this lack. While you worry about being understood, those who hold power are busy being feared. While you seek the warmth of the herd, the cold of the mountain is what forges the steel. Machiavelli didn't write for the beloved. He wrote for the survivors who understand that love is a volatile bond, broken at the first opportunity, while fear is an iron mask that no one dares ignore. If everyone is against you, congratulations. You have finally ceased to be invisible. You have become a variable they cannot control, a flaw in their system of mediocre expectations. Most people die without ever experiencing the purity of strategic isolation. They live in a democracy of others' opinions, where their worth is voted on by minds that don't even know their own shadow. Do you feel wronged? Do you feel the bitterness of betrayal or the weight of exclusion? This pain you carry is proof of your mental enslavement. You still care, and as long as you care, they will own you. The common man sees the world against him as an abyss. The sovereign sees it as a wall he himself built to keep the weak out. The wound that burns within you today is not caused by the wickedness of others, but by your own resistance to accepting the predatory nature of humanity. Did you expect loyalty from someone who can barely be loyal to their own instincts? How arrogant of you. On this journey, I will strip you of every layer of cheap moralism that prevents you from seeing the hidden architecture of power. You are not here to learn how to make friends. You are here to learn how to transform the hostility of others into fuel for your own rise. When everyone is against you, the game becomes binary. Either you become the victim who confirms their superiority, or you become the enigma that haunts them in their sleep. But make no mistake, what I'm about to reveal to you isn't a self-help guide to massage your wounded ego. It's an anatomical dissection of domination. If you seek comfort, go back to the herd. If you seek sovereignty, prepare for the cold, because now I'm going to show you that isolation isn't a prison, it's the laboratory where your new self will be forged. But that's just the surface. There's an even deeper layer where the hatred of others ceases to be an attack and becomes their greatest tool for manipulation. Your first great defeat didn't happen in the external world. It occurred the moment you believed the world should be fair to you. This is the disease of expectation, the silent poison that paralyzes the common man and delivers him on a silver platter to his tormentors. You feel wounded because you still operate under the childish logic that merit attracts reward and kindness generates loyalty. Wake up, the universe is not a court of ethics, it is an ecosystem of colliding wills. For Machiavelli, politics and life are extensions of the same jungle. For Schopenhauer, the world is nothing more than a blind and insatiable will, where each being tries to devour the space of the other to guarantee its own existence. When you say everyone is against me, you are merely describing the gravity of human nature. What you call persecution, the strategist calls necessary friction. No one kicks a dead dog, and no one opposes a man who does not represent a threat or an ascension. If the resistance around you has increased, it is because your volume in the world has begun to occupy the space that previously belonged to others. The mediocre man seeks refuge in victimhood. He wraps himself in the cloak of injustice to justify his own inaction. He wants the world to apologize for being cruel, but the sovereign man understands that the cruelty of others is merely a force of nature, like the wind or the rain. You don't argue with the storm, you build a lightning rod. The hatred they pour upon you is in fact an involuntary tribute to your relevance. They don't hate you, they hate the part of you that reminds them of what they failed to be. What I'm doing here is reframing your reality. You are not a target, you are an obstacle. And being an obstacle requires a mental structure of ice. As long as you seek moral justification for your isolation, you will remain on your knees. But the moment you embrace the fact that life is a war of perceptions and that your role is not to be loved but to be unshakable, the game changes. You cease to be the defendant begging for mercy and become the architect observing the construction of your own fortress. The resistance is not a sign that you should stop, but confirmation that you have finally begun to walk. Hatred is the GPS of power. If the path is clear of enemies, you are probably heading towards nothing. The question now is not how to make them stop, but how to use the energy of their attack to accelerate your own inertia. Now pay attention, because this is where the game stops being a matter of emotional resilience and becomes a science of domination. I'm going to reveal the invisible mechanism that makes people act against you. and how you can dismantle this machine from the inside. Understand the mechanism. Nobody hates you for what you do, but for what your existence proves about their inadequacy. What you call the world against you is in fact a biological defense mechanism of the herd. Most people live under an invisible contract of mutual mediocrity. They agree not to shine so that no one feels inferior. When you decide to break this pact, you become an anomaly in the system. You become the mirror that reflects with unbearable clarity everything they would like to be, but didn't have the composure to achieve. The mechanics are simple and cruel. The human ego is a status predator. For Schopenhauer, the will that moves the world is a blind force that seeks expansion at any cost. If you are rising while others are stagnating, their perception is not that you are talented, but that they are diminishing. In the mind of the common man, power is a zero-sum game. For them to feel great, you need to be diminished. The coordinated attack you are suffering now is not a misstep. It is the system's desperate attempt to restore the balance of mediocrity. They use what Machiavelli called the weapons of opinion. When they can't beat you in the arena of merit, they try to destroy you in the court of reputation. They whisper, isolate, distort, and label. Why? Because isolation is the cheapest weapon to tame a rebellious spirit. They want you to feel small so that your will to power transforms into a desire for acceptance. The hidden mechanics of social power work through the contagion of doubt. If everyone says you're the problem, the system expects you to eventually believe it and sabotage yourself. But here lies the secret that everyday tyrants try to hide. Their opposition is proof that their will is superior. The herd doesn't unite against the weak, it unites against the dangerous. If the pressure has increased, it's because you stopped being a piece on their chessboard and started becoming the player. The machinery of hatred is fueled by fear, and fear is the involuntary recognition of your strength. They are trying to bury you, unaware that you are a seed of a species they cannot comprehend. But most people, upon realizing this mechanism, make a fatal mistake. They try to explain themselves. They try to prove that they are good. And it is precisely here that the game is lost before it even begins. The system loves those who justify themselves because those who justify themselves admit that others have the right to judge them. And this brings us to the most humiliating mistake you're probably making right now without realizing it. It's the standard that separates the men who are crushed by history from those who write it with the blood of their opponents. The most humiliating mistake you make, the pattern that keeps you chained to the mire of mediocrity, is emotional reactivity. Understand this: every time you feel compelled to explain yourself, to prove others wrong, or to defend your honor against slander, you are in fact admitting that they have authority over you. The average person is a slave to stimuli. He is like Pavlov's dog. Someone rings the bell of provocation and he barks the expected response. He is predictable, and what is predictable is easily dominated. When everyone is against you, your ego panics. It screams for justice. It cries for recognition. You want them to see your truth. But for the strategist, truth is irrelevant. What matters is controlling perception. By reacting with anger or indignation, you show exactly where the wound is. You hand over the map of your vulnerability on a silver platter. You tell the world, this is where it hurts. Please keep hitting. Indignation is the refuge of the powerless. It's the sound of someone who has been hit and doesn't know how to bleed in silence. Observe the pattern of the weak. They try to convince their enemies through logic. What monumental folly! Schopenhauer already warned us that the intellect is merely a servant of the will. If their will is to destroy you, to protect their own wounded ego, no logical argument will stop them. When you try to talk or clarify, you only provide more ammunition for the attack. You become entertainment for the sadists. They don't want your explanation, they want your reaction. They feed on your loss of composure, because every time you lose your temper, you lose a piece of your sovereignty. The reactive man is a ventriloquist dummy whose strings are pulled by any idiot with a biting opinion. You pride yourself on your authenticity when you explode, but that explosion is the ultimate proof that you are not in control of yourself. You are merely a reflection of what others do to you. As long as you are reactive, you will be a disposable piece on someone else's chessboard, a shard of broken glass being pushed along by the tide of public opinion. To be a winner when the world isolates you, the first thing that must die is your desire to be understood. Understanding is a luxury for friends. For enemies, you must be an impenetrable enigma. If you continue to react like a commoner, you will never be treated like a king. Silence is not just the absence of sound, it is the vacuum that sucks the strength from your opponent. But you still don't know how to use that vacuum. You still fear the emptiness that remains when you stop defending yourself. But without the next point, you remain vulnerable. Now pay attention, because what I'm about to give you is the first tactical weapon that will transform your isolation into an overwhelming advantage. This is where the game stops being about them and starts being about your new power architecture. The first turning point is not an act of brute force, but a radical act of detachment. It's the exact moment when you stop fighting the current and decide to become the very rock that parts the waters. The winner doesn't try to tear down the wall of opposition. He simply removes the ground from under the feet of those who attack him. How? Through strategic inaccessibility. From now on, your main weapon is the void. Machiavelli taught that a prince must be a master of simulation and dissimulation. If everyone is against you, your greatest advantage is that they believe they know how you will suffer. They await your downfall, your lament, your quest for revenge. When you deliver absolute silence, you deny them the psychic nourishment of victory. The enemy who attacks the void ends up dislocating his own shoulder. The mental weapon I give you today is the mask of ice. While the average person exposes their inner self in every argument, you will begin to treat the hostility of others as an irrelevant meteorological phenomenon. If they insult you, you observe it like an entomologist observes a noisy insect. If they isolate you, you transform that isolation into a laboratory of self-mastery. The first real victory happens when their opinion ceases to be a fact and becomes merely background noise. You are no longer in the courtroom. You are the silent observer studying the weakness of the one who judges. Feel the power of this reversal. The moment you stop defending yourself, the pressure shifts. The attacker needs a solid target to feel powerful. By becoming psychologically fluid and emotionally untouchable, you generate deep anxiety in your opponent, and they begin to wonder, why isn't he reacting? What does he know that I don't? What is he plotting in silence? Their fear is your first throne. You haven't won the war yet, but you've just taken control of time. The common man spends his energy trying to be accepted. The sovereign spends his energy becoming dangerous. And the danger doesn't come from aggression, but from unpredictability. By adopting this stance, you cease to be the fleeing prey and become the waiting predator. You are no longer playing their game. You are creating a new chessboard where the rules are dictated by your indifference. Now pay attention, because now comes the part that changes everything. When you change your inner posture, the gravitational field around you shifts. People who previously despised you will begin to feel something they can't explain. And it is here that your isolation begins to transform into a dark and irresistible form of magnetism. Now watch the social architecture crumble around you. When you stop reacting, the world short circuits. The average person is addicted to confirmation. They need you to feel attacked in order for them to feel powerful. But when you don the ice mask, you create a power vacuum that no one knows how to fill. What was once a coordinated attack against you now transforms into internal turmoil among your opponents. They begin to stumble over their own words because you have removed the support where they based their hatred, your vulnerability. This is the phenomenon of the gravity of silence. Machiavelli knew that mystery is the greatest multiplier of a leader's strength. The moment you become unreadable, you become dangerous. The same people who once slandered you now feel a suffocating tension in your presence. Why? Because your silence is a mirror that reflects back to them their own insecurity. They begin to project onto you capabilities that you may not even possess yet. They wonder, what is he planning? What hidden allies does he have? How can he be so untouchable while the world crumbles? The perception of superiority is born from indifference. While others fight for crumbs of attention and approval, you become the dark sun around which they involuntarily orbit. The respect they denied to the needy you, they now bestow upon the enigmatic you. Notice the shift in dynamics. They begin to modulate their tone of voice around you. They try to test the waters with indirect comments, seeking a crack in your armor. If you give in and laugh at a joke or become irritated by an insult, you become one of them again. But if you maintain a sovereign distance, you enslave them through curiosity and fear. This is the practical application of mental superiority. You don't need to defeat them physically if you've already colonized their minds with doubt. Hatred transforms into a distorted form of obsession. They won't stop talking about you, and every word they utter is another brick in the construction of your myth. The sovereign man doesn't beg for a place at the table. He creates a table so silent and austere that everyone else feels like an unwelcome guest in their own reality. You've begun to understand that power isn't something you ask for, it's something you emanate through restraint. Controlling the masses begins with controlling your own eyelids. But beware, for this shift in social posture is merely a side effect of something far darker happening within you. Now pay attention, because this is where the game ceases to be external and becomes viscerally internal. There is an even deeper layer, a basement in your psyche that you have been avoiding visiting, but it is there that the true source of your weakness resides, and your only chance for absolute sovereignty. You believe your suffering stems from the malice of others, but the truth is far more humiliating. Your suffering comes from your own spiritual beggary. The deepest layer of this abyss is not what they do to you, but the fact that you still need them to stop. You feel wrong because deep down you still gave them the power to define who you are. The persecution you feel is merely a symptom of an addiction you refuse to cure, the addiction to being seen as good, right, or worthy by minds you yourself despise. For Schopenhauer, life is an oscillation between pain and boredom, driven by a desire that is never satisfied, and your greatest desire, your greatest weakness, is validation. As long as you carry this need, you will be a slave, no matter how silent or strategic you may seem on the outside. The world against you is in fact a mirror of your own insecurity. If their hatred hurts you, it's because you still believe they have the right to judge you. You are fighting external ghosts while the true tyrant lives in your chest, whispering that you need the herd's forgiveness to feel at peace. The sovereign man is not the one who conquers his enemies, but the one who renders them irrelevant. Machiavelli warned that a prince should not worry about a reputation for cruelty as long as it keeps his subjects united and loyal. But here, his most rebellious subject is his own ego. It is a parasite that feeds on the attention of others. Even if that attention comes in the form of stones thrown at you. You prefer to be hated than to be forgotten, and it is this fear of being forgotten that keeps you trapped in their game. True sovereignty is born the moment you cut the umbilical cord that binds you to the perception of others. It is ontological isolation. It is understanding that the opinion of 1,000 fools doesn't weigh an ounce on the scales of your reality. The wound you feel is not an attack on your honor. It is your ego bleeding because it didn't receive the applause it thought it deserved. As long as you seek justice, you will be a victim. The moment you seek only power, you will be a god in your own territory. Stop looking outside for the face of your enemy. Look inside and find the needy child who still wants to be loved by those who don't know how to love. Their hatred is an external noise, but your reaction is an internal betrayal. You are surrendering your peace in exchange for a war that isn't worth your blood. Their resistance is the building material, but your neediness is the crack in the foundation. And this brings us to the point of no return. Because now that you've seen the parasite, you only have two choices. Either you continue feeding it with your indignation, or you starve it so that something far more dangerous can be born in its place. Prepare yourself, because the next step demands a sacrifice of identity that most people don't have the stomach for. This is where the game ceases to be technical and becomes a transfiguration. We have reached the breaking point. If you have followed me this far, you have already felt the tremor in the foundations of your old self. But feeling is not enough. It is necessary to set the bridge ablaze. What most men seek is a power technique to apply to their weak personality, like putting on a golden suit of armor over a body of clay. They want to be winners, but they still want to carry the feelings of the loser, resentment, the desire for justice, and the hope for reconciliation. Understand once and for all, for the sovereign to be born, the beggar for affection that dwells within you must be eliminated. This is the point of no return. From this second on, you stop trying to be strategic and start being the strategy. It's no longer a mask you put on to leave the house, it's the skin you inhabit. The common man is made of clay. He is molded by the hands of public opinion, by the warmth of praise and the coldness of criticism. He is a malleable creature and therefore a slave to circumstances. The winner, the heir of Machiavelli, is made of granite. He does not react to the environment. He deforms it with his own gravity. Identity rupture demands that you stop seeing yourself as someone suffering injustice and start seeing yourself as someone undergoing a purging process. Those who oppose you are no longer your enemies. They are the necessary setting for your transfiguration. Their hatred is the fire that burns away your impurities. Without their opposition, you would remain that weak, needy, and predictable version of yourself. Isolation is not a punishment imposed upon you. It is the rite of passage you finally had the courage to accept. Observe your old self as a corpse on the other side of the abyss. That man who lost sleep over malicious comments, who sought to prove his worth to those who weren't worth his time, who expected life to be a moralistic fairy tale. He's dead, and you shouldn't grieve for him. Feel relief. You are now free from the burden of being good in the eyes of the mediocre. Your new identity doesn't seek the world's forgiveness, it seeks the subjugation of reality to its objectives. When you reach this state, something both terrifying and wonderful happens. You stop feeling anger. Anger is an emotion of those who still feel equal to their opponent. The sovereign doesn't feel anger at the insect that stings him. He simply decides whether to ignore it or crush it. His peace is now icy because it doesn't depend on truce with others, but on absolute victory over himself. You are no longer feigning indifference. You have become ice itself. But make no mistake, the change of identity is only the beginning of your true ascension. Now that you have incinerated your past, you are ready to look at the world not as a prison, but as an architecture that you can redesign. And this is where the game ceases to be a fight for survival and becomes a worldview. Now comes the part that changes everything, where we will transform this new stance into an unwavering philosophy of existence. Now raise your vision beyond the immediate battlefield. What you previously called siege is in fact your foundation. The philosophy that emerges from this isolation is not a survival tactic, it is a cosmology of power. For the common man, existence is a theater where he desperately seeks a role written by others. For you, from now on, existence is the rough marble, and your will is the only chisel. Schopenhauer taught us that honor is merely the opinion of others about our worth. What a wretched concept for one who seeks sovereignty. The victor possesses no external honor. He possesses an integrity of ice, a core that neither expands with praise nor contracts with insult. Understand the final transmutation. When everyone is against you, the universe has stopped ignoring you. You have ceased to be a mere extra in someone else's story and have become the central event of your own reality. The hatred of the masses is the wind that blows against the wings of a predator. It only serves to make it climb higher. Your new rule of existence is the sovereignty of metaphysical contempt. It is not a furious contempt. Anger still admits equality. It is the silent contempt of the architect for the dust that accumulates on the blueprint of his building. You observe the resistance of others with the same coldness with which you observe the erosion of a rock. It is merely time and nature doing their work of wear and tear, while you remain unchanged. Machiavelli didn't just want the prince to win, he wanted the prince to create a new order. When you become untouchable inside, you begin to redesign the architecture of the possible around you. The world isn't something that happens to you. The world is a representation of your strength. If the scenario is hostile, it's because the scenario is testing the density of your soul. If you don't break under the weight of 1,000 condemning gazes, you become the standard of measurement for them all. The mediocre man needs a we to feel secure. The sovereign is an I so vast that his silence fills any space. Feel the uplift. You are no longer fighting for a place in the sun. You have become the very eclipse that defines the light of others. The hostility that once frightened you is now your pedestal. You have learned that the solitude of the top is preferable to the suffocation of the bottom. But this philosophical clarity is not the end of the line. It is merely the state of mind necessary for the coup de grace. Now pay attention, because this is where the theme reveals its true face. This entire process of destruction and reconstruction has brought us to a single point of convergence, and this leads us to the most dangerous part, the final rite of passage, where technology becomes destiny and man becomes myth. The rite of passage is complete. If you've made it this far, the man who started this video no longer exists. You entered as a creature of clay, molded by reactions and need, and you leave as an architecture of silence and steel. From this second on, the hostility of the world is not a burden you carry, it is the pedestal on which you stand. You have finally understood Machiavelli's final lesson. It's not about being understood or loved, but about being so unshakable that the hatred of others becomes a form of involuntary worship. You now inhabit, the void, where others lose their breath. While the world around you cries out for justice and crumbs of attention, you whisper orders to your own will. While they seek culprits for their failures, you build empires upon the ashes of the expectations they had of you. The clarity that now shines in your eyes is the coldness of granite under the moon, impenetrable, constant, sovereign. The world against you was merely the necessary forge to temper the metal of your soul. You didn't just win their game, you destroyed the board and now dictate the gravity of every move. This is the state of mind of the rare ones, of the few who prefer the isolation of the top to the suffocation of the corral. If you have felt the weight of this truth and chosen not to look away, you are already part of the circle. From today onward, you no longer walk with the herd. You walk in the shadow that the herd fears, guided only by the black light of your own lucidity. The fear they feel is your recognition. The silence they keep before you is your conquered territory. To seal this pact with your new identity and mark your entry into the circle of the awakened, comment below, Sovereign in Chaos. Let the mediocre try to decipher your enigma while you move forward without looking back. Sign up now to keep this worldview sharp, for sovereignty demands a discipline that the common man cannot bear. Join those who ask no permission to win. The external war has ceased because your internal war has been won. The throne is empty. Take it.